Hello, home instead of Montgomery County. I really wish I could be there with you in person, but I want to share with you some things about care for the caregiver. My name is Dr. Matthew Hoffman, and it's just a real honor just to be with you and to kind of share some of this material with you. And I just want you to know, just from the very outset, the work that you do each and every day impacts people's lives. You're a part of people's stories. You make a difference in your clients' lives. You make a difference in their families' lives. You're providing a real sense of peace of mind for their loved ones that they're concerned about. That's why they've brought you into their home to help care for someone that they love, that they can't on their own. And so just from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you. I know what it means to be a caregiver. I was a caregiver at a non-medical caregiving service, very similar to Home Instead, many years ago. So I know what that's like. I was a CNA as well, being there with the patients, those long shifts. There's many times there's things that are just incredibly rewarding about the work that we get to do. But in reality, it's also can be incredibly stressful. Also, in way of introduction, I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name's Dr. Matthew Hoffman. And so I have a doctorate actually in a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about here today. I spent over 7 years looking at areas of what's called compassion fatigue. And you've probably heard about that term before. And in this short video, we want to kind of unpack some of that. What does that mean? And how you can begin to recognize it as you experience it. And then also how you can begin to develop a plan that really advances your own care for yourself as you're caring for others. I'll reference this analogy throughout, but you've probably heard it many times, is that you can't pour water out of an empty cup. If someone's thirsty and you're there giving them a drink of water, that's great. But if you have been spent and you've poured out all that you can, we can't give people a drink out of an empty cup. And so it's the reality that those of us that give care, we need to step into those spaces to receive care as well. So I that's kind of what my expertise is in the studies that I've done, and I'm really glad to be able to be here with you and sharing this with you because, like I said, caregiving can be a really rewarding career in many ways. But let's be honest, it's taxing. I had a client years ago. I still hear his voice in my head, and sometimes I laugh. Sometimes it's a little painful. Um, you know, uh, there's it's a unique space that we get to walk in, isn't it? This particular gentleman, years and years ago, he did not know what my name was, but he always referred to me by the company that he hired me through. So in this case, he would call me Home Instead, and every time he talked to me, hey, Home Instead. That's how he would just talk to me. Yeah, hey, Home Instead, I wanted to ask you this question, and a lot of times it was humorous. Sometimes it was taxing. There would be those times I would put him down on the commode and give him privacy, and then he would yell at me from the other room, home instead. And he would tell me what to do, which was oftentimes in really crass language. um, so it has certain joys to it, the work that we do. But if we're honest, it is taxing. So, what we're going to do in this video, like I said, we're going to talk about compassion fatigue, the definition of it, and then what do we do about it? You probably well, so let's first talk about compassion fatigue. You've probably heard that term before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, and that's okay if you haven't. But let me just say to you, anybody who is in a caregiving profession, it's not if you're going to experience compassion fatigue, it is when. And let me just say this to you. If you've been in a caregiving profession more than 10 minutes, okay, you will experience a form of something that's called compassion fatigue. I want to define it and I want to talk about it experientially so that way as you begin to experience some of the unique aspects of compassion fatigue, that it doesn't scare you, that it doesn't, you'll be able to identify it and go, oh, that's what that is. And so that way it doesn't scare you and think, gosh, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Or, um, maybe I just shouldn't be doing, caregiving work. Again, anybody who is in any form of caregiving work, I mean, if you're a mom, if you're a dad, you're a parent, you have experienced compassion fatigue, okay? This is a very real thing, and it's has kind of become a buzzword that people talk about but don't define. And see, when you don't define something, you can't put handles on it. You can't grab hold of it to be able to kind of know, okay, well then what do I do with this? Okay, so let's kind of unpack what is compassion fatigue. Um, you know, the the type of work that we do is compassion work. That's just the type of work that we do. And with each type of work, there is going to be a form of fatigue that's associated with that particular type of work. For instance, if you did manual labor all day long, say you're out there digging ditches and digging trenches or what have you, and you were doing that type of work, you would experience physical fatigue. It's a particular type of fatigue that's associated with the work. Your muscles get tired. You begin to experience this. Your rate of respiration. Sometimes maybe it's a struggle to breathe. Those sorts of things, because you've exerted a type of energy. Okay, and any time work is happening in any form, at its basic functions, what's happening is energy is coming out of you. And in this case, if it's physical work, you're going to have physical energy coming out of you, and so it's going to be physically fatiguing, and so you're going to need a particular type of care that's associated with the energy that has been expended and has been fatigued in you. And so, if it's physical labor, you're going to need a particular type of care that looks like not doing physical work, or letting your muscles rest. Maybe even, going and getting the heating pad out, or a massage, or, something along those lines. And those are particular types of care that are directed at that particular type of fatigue. Okay. And like with physical labor, no one looks at someone and says, well, you should be able to do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no breaks, no time off, and you're just doing it. Okay. No, of course not. I mean, we'd last for maybe 24 hours if we got that far. And then we're toast, or something may give out, because we're not beings that have infinite measures of energy. Okay. If you were to do Have you had a particular type of work where you were doing mental calculations all day long? You would experience a unique type of fatigue where your mind would get tired. Say you're doing mathematical equations in your head. Well, your brain's going to need a unique type of care, whether that means, okay, I'm not going to look at math problems or whatever this is, and maybe I'm going to watch a movie, or I'm just going to take a nap, or I'm going to, use a different part of my brain. Maybe I'm going to paint, or I'm going to do something different to give your mind a sense of rest. Well, the type of work that we do and the energy that we expend out is compassion. And thus we experience compassion fatigue. Before we start kind of breaking down compassion fatigue a little bit more, I want to kind of talk with you about a definition here. So think about the word compassion for a moment. The first part of that word is made up with the letter COM, calm, compassion. And the first part of that word, calm, it means something to having to do with combining things. It means to go to be with. So you think of other words like come, combine, come here. You're completing something. So it means it has to do with two entities coming together. Okay. The latter part of that word, passion, finds its Latin roots in concepts of suffering. So, just as a point of reference, uh, there are many people of, like, for instance, of the Christian faith that during the week before they celebrate Easter, they'll celebrate what has traditionally been known as the Christ's Passion Week, meaning the week of his suffering. Okay, so this is where we're kind of getting these concepts. So the first part means to go to be with, calm, and the second part, passion, has these concepts of suffering. So as you bring that together, that really does define our work of what we do is we go to be with the sufferer. Okay, this is what we're doing. We're compassion. We're going to be with the sufferer. We're not running away from the sufferer, but we're going to be with them. And if we're honest, the reality is that as we go to be with the sufferer, there is unique energy that comes from us. It's an honor, it's a privilege to be able to be there with them. However, it can be uniquely taxing. It is taxing being with someone and even just listening to them. We're not in a stressful situation right now, but I've been talking to you for the last 10 plus minutes, and that can be something where even just listening to someone, your brain goes to other places, right? To be able to care for itself. You're thinking about other things, and then you come back and you go, oh, what's that, strange bald-headed guy on the video saying to me again? And so you come back and you focus in, right? Well, that's a way that our minds care for itself, okay? Well, when you put yourself in high stress situations of someone who has dementia, someone who's in pain, when people are in pain, they don't typically respond in accordance with their best selves. Sometimes stuff comes out and it can be anger or what have you. That is tiring. And so when you're in those situations and you experience that sense of fatigue and how that comes out in us, it can come out in certain ways like, ooh, I don't want to be around this. So remember, compassion is to go be with the sufferer. That's tiring to do that. And there can be impulses that says, okay, I need to get away from this. That's where sometimes our bodies and our minds go into fight or flight mode. Or, speaking of fight, there can be certain senses of irritation that come out in us in response to what we're experiencing in front of us, where it can be, a sense of impatience, or I can't believe they're doing that, or, I have to honestly say, not just as a caregiver, but as a dad. I've experienced that where I'm like, oh my gosh, when is this child going to stop talking? Or, why do they keep asking me the same question over and over again, right? So there's a certain sense of irritation that comes up as we go to be with the sufferer, whether it's the kid who wants the cookie for the 100th time, or the person that we're dealing with that doesn't understand, why is my body doing this now, and they're reacting in particular ways. And so because of that and that sense of fatigue, we could find ourselves, there can be responses, and your mind and body will seek to care for itself, whether it's flight or fight or freeze, or, some variation there in between. And so it's important for us to grow in self-awareness in the midst of those high stress situations. How am I responding to this? What's going off inside of me? And this is the caregiver's journey of learning to develop particular coping mechanisms and coping tips so that we can step into this healing profession with our best selves to be healers and not harmers. Now, if I was to ask you, anybody want to be a harmer? I can sure bet that none of you are like, oh yeah. But the reality is, when compassion fatigue is left unchecked and we just keep going, when we're not caring for ourselves in the moment and big picture perspective, we can do things unintentionally that we don't mean to be harming. We can actually mean the exact opposite. Look, I came here to help you. And so you're wanting to be a healer, but what's even coming out of us? Even listen to how I even said that. Look, I'm here to help you. There can be things that come out of us that aren't necessarily healing to the people that we're caring for. And I'm telling you, I'm not saying that this is easy. Just like work in and of itself, in all of its forms, by definition, is not just easy, okay? Now, you'll grow in learning how to cope with, in a healthy way, these situations. You'll grow in case wisdom of knowing, oh, this is how someone with dementia may typically respond, so I'm not going to take those things personal. Even that particular thing that I just said there, I'm not going to take this personal. That is a coping tip, coping mechanism that I can grab hold of as I'm in those situations, okay? Let's transition and let's talk about, for the next couple of minutes, some situational self-care of things that you can do in the moment. And for each one of us, it comes, there can be different things that we can do, because what might be healing and nurturing to you in one, might not be healing and nurturing for someone else, okay? But like, for instance, when you're in high stress situations, I want you to get out a piece of paper. I want you to start kind of jotting some of these things down, okay? What are some things that you do to take care of yourself? And maybe after this video is over, maybe you can have a time just to kind of unpack that a little bit, or even afterwards or what have you, sharing ideas with one another. Because there might be some things that you do that someone else hasn't thought of that's really helpful to share. But like, for instance, I know for myself, when I'm in high stress situations, I concentrate on my breathing. I think to myself, okay, Matthew, just breathe. Just breathe. And what I'm doing, even when I say that to myself, that phrase, Matthew, just breathe, what's happening is I'm getting out of lower base cognitive thinking of fight or flight, and I'm getting into higher cognitive reasoning of recognizing this is a stressful situation. Breathe, Matthew. And as I'm breathing, here's another coping tip. Pause. Right now, there may be this energy that's inside of me that just wants to lash back out. Okay, let me do two things. Let me breathe. Let me pause. Here's another coping tip. Count to 10 in your mind before you respond. Because especially if you find yourself responding and you grow in self awareness and you realize, oh, wow, I'm just firing away here. This isn't good. Okay, let's step back. Breathe. Breathe. Pause. Let me count to 10. So there's 3 things I've just done to be able to care for myself in that moment. Fourthly, I mentioned, the sense of, okay, I'm not going to take this personal. This person, the organ in their head, their brain is deteriorating. It's not working in how they would have normally functioned years prior, or whatever that may be. Or this person's in intense pain, so they're just trying to get away from the pain. So, okay, don't take this personal. So I'm gonna hold on to that. So now I've got like 4 or 5 things now that I'm doing in the midst of this. There's other things that are a little bit even more advanced in the way of redirection. How can I redirect this individual to something positive that they like? Um, the gentleman that used to yell at me and say, home instead. um, um, it was a simple thing, but cookies, I just would revert to cookies. And I'd say, Mr. So and so, do you want a cookie? Oh. And immediately it put him into a positive state of mind. And he was like, yes, okay, we're going to have one, but we got to finish this first. So I've redirected them. So these are things called situational self care, and you might find a host of them. If you come from a particular aspect of faith, maybe you're going to stop and pray for a moment, in your mind. Or maybe it's something that someone has said to you, a particular statement, and thought, okay, I'm going to grab hold of that statement, or a particular value. Like, for instance, in my life, I want to be known as a kind man and a compassionate man. So, okay, Matthew, that starts now, right here today, as I'm dealing with this individual who's struggling, and I'm struggling, and it's okay to struggle and not have all the answers and those sorts of things. So that's situational self-care, okay? I want to encourage you, and you're on an odyssey, okay? I just gave you 5, 6 things. We need to build that out, and you need to verbalize it. You need to write it down, reflect on it. What would be helpful in this situation to diffuse it, to really show up as a healer, because that's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to have this healing, caring presence in people's lives, not harming. But the reality is, when we don't care for ourselves, you will go into certain forms of fight or flight. And those responses typically aren't always the best. Okay? So I'm not saying categorically always, but it's just that they tend to be reactionary rather than responding from our values, from who we are, our better selves, and stepping into those spaces. Let's talk about big picture perspective for a moment in the time that we have left. I want to talk with you about caring for yourself outside of work in ways that you're starting to build rhythms in your life. Okay? Oftentimes, when people think about self care, they do one of 2 things. They think, well, that's just something that's kind of a nicety. That's just something over here. Maybe I'll get to that someday. Or they only think about self care when they feel the need for it, when they're in the pressure cooker. It's kind of like only thinking about diet, exercise, taking my medication when I'm crashing. Okay? It's like the person who gets hauled into the ER at 3 a.m. with chest pains, and they say, Mr. Hoffman, have you experienced this sense of fatigue and this tightness of chest and high anxiety and whatever it is? Have you experienced this before now? And it's like, well, yeah, I have. And it's like, well, okay, if I survive that event, hopefully I do, self-care is going to become really important to me in that moment. diet, exercise, taking my medication, doing all these things. Well, we want to think about it before the crisis hits, okay? And this is like the care plans that we have for our patients, for our clients. We have a certain rhythm for them that helps keep them well. Well, you need a care plan as well. It's a self care plan where you go to be with the sufferer. And in this case, the sufferer is you because you're tired and you're wore out. And it's being self compassionate. Okay. You're going to be with the sufferer where you're being present with yourself and saying, okay, what's happening with me? How do I care for myself? What are the tools in my toolbox that I already have available to me to be able to care for myself in healthy ways? And I want you to put rhythms in. And so here's some things really quickly. Here's part of your homework, and this is your homework for the rest of your life, okay? It's a long homework assignment. I want you to be thinking and even getting out your calendar, getting out some things where you're building margins in, you're building these things in so that way when you're doing self-care, it's not just when you feel the need for it and you're in emotional shock and you're just exhausted and done and you would just want to resign from everything. We want to instead what we want to do is we want to build rhythms in that are looking at some things of what can you do on a daily basis to take care of yourself. What's your day? What's an example of something you want to do daily? Okay, so that might be I'm going to go take a walk. I'm going to step outside. I'm going to watch the sunrise and sunset. I'm going to sit out on the front porch with my cup of coffee alone, and I'm just going to breathe. I'm going to journal my thoughts to be able to get them out. I'm going to. I'm an artist, so I draw and I paint and I do a lot of those things on a daily basis. That cares for me, that nurtures me. And what's nurturing and caring for you might not be nurturing and caring for me, and vice versa. Like for some of you, you might think drawing, ooh, that's just going to jack up my anxiety more. That doesn't sound fun to me. But instead, this is or that is. Maybe it's reading something. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's calling a trusted friend and saying, hey, I just need your ear for a moment. So there's daily things that we can do. I want you to step back from that and ask yourself the question, what's something that I can do this week and every week? What's something that I can put into rhythms? Maybe it's time spent with family. Maybe it's care for others, whatever it is. Maybe it's going to see the movie, reading the book, going shopping, doing this particular hobby, knitting, woodworking, whatever it is, okay? Watching the sporting event. What am I going to do this week to take care of myself? Then I want you to take a step back further and I want you to identify another activity that's not a daily, it's not a weekly, but it's a monthly. What am I going to do uniquely this month to take care of myself? Maybe it's I'm gonna go get my nails done. I'm gonna go I'm gonna get a massage. I'm gonna see that friend. I'm gonna go out for dinner with my spouse, significant other friends. I'm just gonna go have some fun. What does this look like? So we're asking these questions like, what is fun for you? What does that look like? Start writing those things down and then begin to plug those in. So daily, weekly, monthly, and then even stepping back further and saying, what am I going to do? What's something unique within this quarter that I'm going to do? What's a quarterly thing that I can do? And then stepping back and saying, okay, annually, this year, this particular year, what's something that we're going to do? And it doesn't have to be big, but maybe it's something like I'm going to take X amount of days off and I'm just going to be at home, or whatever it is. But it's what's my daily vacation, my weekly vacation, my monthly vacation, my quarterly vacation, my yearly vacation. And when I say vacation, it may not be time off of work, but it's time that is away from work. Daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. What's that look like? And we begin to put those rhythms in place. And I will tell you what will wind up happening. You'll develop these, as you develop these rhythms, it has a cumulative effect to it. It has a build-up effect of where you'll start caring for people not out of your negative, but out of your reserves, out of, those sorts of things. And so, I hope these things are helpful for you. Again, I just want to say as we wrap up here, thank you. Thank you so very much for what you do each and every day. You make an impact in people's lives. But self care for the caregiving professional is not a nicety, it's an absolute necessity for us to do this well, growing in your craft, growing in your career of how do I care for individuals around me. Thank you so very much for allowing me to be a part of your time. Take care.